Hi friends, it's Deanna Willison with Our Blooming Catholic Life, and this is a book review on a little book, but a very deep one. And so this is actually my second attempt at this. I think the first attempt left me with more questions than answers, and so I imagined it was going to be difficult for you as well. So let's give it another shot. I have actually not read the book. This is not a teaching on it. This is a book review on what you might expect going through it. Now, please note, this is the Tan Classics edition. They do have their simplified series, as well as this book is available in paperback, ebook, and an MP3. So you have a variety of formats. If this one appears too difficult, they have like the Classics Made Simple, I think is the name of the series. So Tan Books can help you out with that. I want to start out by saying Dark Night of the Soul is apparently a continuation of The Ascent of Mount Carmel, an earlier work by St. John of the Cross, but many people study it as a standalone. What I also found out from reading it, it was based off a poem. We learned a couple years ago, we got a book on the poetry of St. John of the Cross. So he had a lot of great poems, especially written while he was imprisoned. And then people asked him to unpack those poems for them. Poetry is not everybody's first language, and so they really needed his help. And the poems are amazing. And so he looks at them through many different lenses throughout the book. So both the same poem is looked at in The Ascent of Mount Carmel as in The Dark Night of the Soul. Let's learn a little bit more about St. John of the Cross. This is from the back of the book. It says, born in 1542. In what is now Spain, St. John of the Cross entered the Carmelites in 1563 and received holy orders 4 years later. Soon after they met, St. Therese of Avila enlisted him in her efforts to purify the Carmelite order. When the strict observances of St. John's descaled, literally shoeless Carmelites sparked widespread reform, some disgruntled monks captured, imprisoned, and tortured him. During those 9 months and beyond, St. John of the Cross endured a dark night of the soul. This and other contemplative experiences inspired his mystical theology and thereby earned him the title of Doctor of the Church. Now, not from the back of the book, but from me. We'll talk just a tiny bit about Dark Night of the Soul. Note they call it here a contemplative experience. So many people, when Mother Teresa, St. Teresa of Calcutta, they revealed her writings talking about Dark Night of the Soul, many people thought it was her questioning her faith. That is not what is meant by a Dark Night of the Soul. Let's get up and read the little description of the book from the back of the book. In Dark Night of the Soul, St. John of the Cross presents for us a portrait painted from his own experience. So this is his own experience he's explaining here. One who advances successfully through struggles of the spiritual life. The dark night that St. John describes is not abandonment by God, but special consideration from him for those who desire to purify and perfect their souls. With a soul purified from earthly attachments, we can advance through the much quoted but oft misunderstood dark night of the soul into unity with God. By accepting the desolation and difficulty of this process, the soul cooperates with God and opens itself to receiving and revealing more perfectly God's glory. Do not be afraid. Dark Night of the Soul, though austere and exacting in its instructions for holy living, is laced with St. John's charity and kindness, his love of all things beautiful and sacred, including you. So let's jump in here. We'll do a little bit of the layout and just some background, a little bit more background that you might need. The dedication is to those who bear their crosses in the moon's dimmest light, that their hearts may come to see. The imprimatur is, I think, Edmund, it's E-D-M, Edmund Canon Sermont, Vicar General, Westminster, 26th of March, 1916. This particular edition was translated by David Lewis, edited with an introduction by Benedict Zimmerman, OCD, with a new preface by J. Connor Gallagher. Again, this is the Tan Classics edition by St. Benedict Press, copyright 2010. Retypeset edition of the text of the 1916 edition, published by Thomas Baker, London. This is important. These editors have Americanized the British spelling throughout the text and made other minor edits. Published with the assistance of the Livingston Corporation. The cover image is actually St. Francis of Paola by Francis Coppola. I always thought it was St. John of the Cross, but it's saying no. It is of St. Francis of Paula. It was printed and bound in the United States of America. Why should you read Dark Night of the Soul? Because it is about your spiritual journey. No matter what stage of spirituality you are experiencing, St. John of the Cross understands where you are and where you are going, and through these pages, he reaches out his hand to help you along. Are you a father of 2, a mother of 5, or a lonely widow, a teacher, a student, a person in the business world? Are you a novice to spiritual studies or one who has sought the inner pilgrim's path for a long time? Are you a healthy skeptic or an open believer? It matters not. This classic Catholic book applies to each and every moment of your unique and individual life. And it just goes on. It's just one page front and back and another half of a page. And that was written by J. Conor Gallagher, Director of Publishing, Pentecost Sunday in 2008. And then we come upon the table of contents. You'll see it's set up much the way I like, except for the numbers over here. Like the headers and all make it super easy, organized to see. But these are in line with the chapter title, not with the text right next to it. So it's a little disjointed for me and difficult to see. But hold on, it is a book meant to be read sequentially, so not to the end of the world. You're going to want to grab a bookmark. There are 2 books. The first one looks at the first stanza of the poem in light of the Night of Sense. Book 2 is going to look at that first stanza and the next one, I believe, with the lens of the Night of the Spirit. The first book has 14 chapters and the second has 25. Normally I read you the titles, but I don't know that they're the most helpful. Some of them just say begins with the first stanza, so that's not the most helpful. So it talks about imperfection of beginners, some of the spiritual imperfections to which beginners are liable in the manner of pride. The next one talks about the capital sin, which is avarice. So it goes through the 7 big sins, right? It's going to go through those because those are things that beginners tend to fall into. That should make complete sense. What happens after the sins? Then it's going to go back to the first line of the first stanza and talk about the explanation of the dark night. And it's going to talk of the signs by which it may be known that the spiritual man is walking in this way of night, or the purgation of sense. How do you conduct yourself? Then it's going to review the entire first stanza of the benefits to which the night of the sense brings to the soul, other benefits that it brings, and then it's going to look at the last 4 lines of the first stanza. That's the end of book 1. Book 2 is going to start the second night, that of the spirit. And it talks about certain imperfections that even proficient people may come across. Of note here, St. John is not saying or expecting that you're going to go straight from one night to the second. He's not saying you're going to read this book and zoom through the spiritual life. That is not what he's saying at all. It is interesting to read. This is his experience, and he's not saying that it happened in a matter of seconds by any means. This is his experience, and it probably happened over the matter of quite a long time. So take heart, fellow traveler. There are some notes of what's to come, then the explanation of the first stanza. Then it talks about how this dim contemplation is not a night only, but pain and torment also for the soul. So a little scarier there, of other sufferings for the soul in the night. The same subject continued, other afflictions and trials of the will, sufferings which distress the soul in this state. You see what I mean? We're not expecting you to, purged, gotten rid of those sins one by one, like bam, 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 bam. And we all know, we've talked about each of us has a major fault. So some of those sins may be more quickly for you to leave behind than others. Each person is unique. And again, this is St. John of the Cross's journey. So he's going to try and help us along. Remember, it said he's going to do it with great charity and love. And it's talking about how the night enlightens the mind, though it brings darkness over it. Explanation of this purgation by a comparison. Then it's going to talk about the second line. So 11 chapters into the second book, and we're just getting to the second line of the first stanza. And it talks about a vehement passion of divine love is the fruit of these sharp afflictions of the soul. So just when you're starting to despair, he's going to promise you these fruits and talk about the divine love. It's going to talk to you how about it's a purgatory, and that illuminates men on earth with that light, which in it the angels are purified and enlightened in heaven. other sweet effects wrought in the soul of the dark night of contemplation, repeats and explains the last 3 lines of the first stanza, the second stanza in its explanation, how the soul journeys securely even though in darkness, gives the second line and explains how this dim contemplation is secret, shows how the secret wisdom is also a ladder. And then it's going to talk about the 10 degrees of that mystic ladder according to St. Bernard and St. Thomas, of the other 5 degrees, of the meaning disguised, the colors in which the soul disguises itself in this night. Then we're going to go on to the 3rd line of the 2nd stanza. Happiness of the soul is having overcome its enemies. The 4th line, discovering the wonderful hiding place of the soul in this night, and how the devil, though he enters other most secret places, enters not this. And then chapter 24 will conclude the explanation of the 2nd stanza, and chapter 25 briefly goes over the 3rd stanza. So we're only on to the 3rd stanza of the poem, and then bam, we hit the introduction into the book. It tells you the Dark Night, though only a short treatise in comparison with the remaining works of St. John of the Cross, is perhaps from a practical point of view the most important of the whole series. Again, reiterating, it's a series of works. Instructions for beginners may be found in abundance. Even the Night of the Sense, as St. John informs us, has numerous exponents, but in the Night of the Spirit, he breaks fresh ground. I want you to get in and read this. This goes into, it's a little bit longer from Father Benedict Zimmermann, but then we get into the Dark Night of the Soul, still in the introduction. It looks like the introduction ends, but it also continues. So this is like a personal letter from him, from Father to us, and it's lovely. And then he's going to give us the poem itself. And the poem actually has 8 stanzas. And then a short explanation of the stanzas. Just really 1 page, and it really focuses on that first stanza, which makes sense because that's what is delved into most in this book, right? We look at it with 2 lenses, the Night of Sense and then blinking up, the Night of Sense, and then why am I blinking out? The Night of the Spirit. Okay. You can easily see when the new book begins. Noticing the Roman numeral page numbers were down here in the bottom. Oh, look, even in the beginning, down in the bottom center. And it's going to stay that way throughout. Remember, friends, if you're new to this channel, you wouldn't know that, but that indicates a book is meant to be read sequentially. So grab yourself a bookmark. That's what you're going to need for this book. Also, super easy to see anytime there's a new chapter. You have this decorative border. You have this in capitals. You have the chapter title in bold italics. Again, italics is not my top choice, and then it's going to give you like a little table of contents, a little outline for the entire chapter is going to begin each chapter. And indeed, all but the first of those are numbered. So you notice the first one is not numbered, but I can show you quickly. The others are numbered 2, 3, 4, so you can find them from that outline. This first little chapter was just really, if you added it all up, barely more than 1 page front and back. So some of the chapters are very small. Some, of course, are larger. Now you'll notice then that it does use footnotes throughout. Sometimes the footnotes are in Spanish because that's the language this was originally written in. So sometimes it gives you his exact words, which is lovely. There are also the biblical citations are going to be as footnotes, not parenthetical. And so one thing we looked at is, okay, when he refers to the Psalms, and I found another one, although this book, this edition does not tell you, they used the Douay edition of the Bible. I don't know that the Douay Rhymes was out yet, so it had the approved form and the Douay. But I have found, looking in my Douay Rhymes Bible, the citations appear to be from that edition. That is probably going to be your best bet if you're looking up the editions. But if you have something else, like an RSV CE2, some form of an Ignatius Bible, whether it's the new Divine Mercy one, or the Bible in a Year, the Ascension Press Bible, those all use RSV, I believe. And these tend to give you, the second set of numbering, but what's in brackets will be the edition, the way of numbering that was used in, forgive me if I get this wrong, the Septuagint, which is what I believe the Douay Rhymes is based off of, which is the version that Christ refers to that is used in the Gospels. But this is the other version of numbering, so it's the big number. So when you're going to look up Psalms, if you're doing it in one of these more modern translations, if it has the brackets, that's the numbering system you want. There are some Psalms that got divided up differently and some that got combined differently. They all end up being back at 150 by the end, but so the Douay-Rheims Bible is what it's going to be the closest to it referring back to if you want to look up those references. I've looked up some other passages, not just Psalms, and that does seem to be the text that most perfectly aligns. That's why I made this video twice, because I wanted to go back and do that for you. I do love this, chapter 5 of the imperfections of beginners in the matter of anger. So number 1 is going to be the 4th imperfection, anger and peevishness, how caused. 2, impatience with self or others, contrary to humility. And 3, that saints are not made in a day. I wanted to remind you that so many people think I'm going to pick up this book, I'm going to study it once, bam, I'm going to be a saint. And a lot of people think that they are when they're done reading it. We all know someone this has happened to, but in all humility, friends, maybe not. Because it's an experience. This is a great book, and it's going to be a great guide to kind of know what's coming ahead, so that when you run into these things, if you run into challenges, you may be able to run back and say, oh, I know St. John of the Cross talked about this. I'm going to go back and see what he has to say about it. Or it's a little bit of warning, a preview of things to come, or maybe you can try and find yourself on that spiritual scale we've all seen. It's a bit of pride to go looking on that spiritual scale as well, so maybe you don't need to really judge that. But having a rough idea when you encounter something new so that you could go back and find, now that's using it as a tool, not as a way to mark your progress, but as a tool so that you know what resources to go to get. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, you're probably dying for me to read more. Let's read the poem on which it is based. Let's do that, and then we'll dive into some later sections maybe and grab some of his language. Here is the poem. In a dark night, with anxious love inflamed, O happy lot, forth unobserved I went, my house being now at rest. In darkness and in safety by the secret ladder disguised, O happy lot, in darkness and concealment, my house being now at rest. In that happy night in secret, seen of none, seeing naught myself, without other light or guide, save that which in my heart was burning. That light guided me more surely than the noonday sun to the place where he was waiting for me, whom I knew well, and where none appeared. O guiding night, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that hast united the lover with his beloved and changed her into love. On my flowery bosom, kept whole for him alone, there he reposed and slept, and I cherished him, and the waving of the cedars fanned him. And his hair floated in the breeze, that from the turret blew. He struck me on the cheek with his gentle hand, and all sensation left me. I continued in oblivion lost, my head was resting on my love, lost to all things and myself, and amid the lilies forgotten, threw all my cares away. It does say, there's a footnote here. When it said, as his hair floated on the breeze, the footnote said, St. John of the Cross actually wrote, as I scattered his hair in the breeze. This does remind you of the Song of Songs, right, from the Old Testament. Lovely. Let's jump in somewhere random. I'm in chapter 4, which is in book 2, an explanation of the first stanza. There's going to be a paraphrase of the first stanza according to the second night, transformation of the memory, intellect, and will, and the continuation. In a dark night with anxious love inflamed, O happy lot, forth unobserved I went, my house being now at rest. Taking these words then with reference to purgation, contemplation, or detachment, or poverty of spirit, these are, as it were, one and the same thing. They may thus be explained in this way, as if the soul were saying, in poverty, without protection and help, in all my powers, the understanding in darkness, the will under constraint, the memory in trouble and distress, in the dark and pure faith, which is the dark night of the natural faculties, the will alone touched by grief and affliction, in the anxieties of the love of God, I went forth out of myself, out of my low conceptions and lukewarm love, out of my scanty and poor sense of God, without being hindered by the flesh or the devil. too. This was to me a great blessing, a happy lot, for by the annihilating and subduing of my faculties, passions, and appetites, and affections, the instruments of my low conception of God, I went forth out of the scanty works and ways of my own to those of God. That is, my understanding went forth out of itself, and from human and natural became divine, for united to God in that purgation, it understands no more by its natural powers, but in the divine wisdom to which it is united. My will went forth out of itself, becoming divine, for now, united with divine love, it loves no more meanly with the powers of its nature, but with the energy and pureness of the divine spirit. Thus the will acts now in the things of God, not in the human way, and the memory also is transformed in eternal apprehensions of glory. Finally, all the energies and affections of the soul are, in this night and purgation of the old man, renewed in a divine temper and delight. And honestly, friends, it just sounds like extended poetry, like he expanded. We talk about in Franciscan lingo, the expansion of the Our Father, which St. Francis of Assisi did. He loved to do that, expand prayers. And it sounds like St. John of the Cross really just expanded that poem. So let's go on and read just a tiny bit of chapter 5. I'm going to skip to the overview and just jump into the explanation so you can see how there is both poetry and prose in here, art and explanation. In a dark night. The dark night is a certain inflowing of God into the soul, which cleanses it of its ignorances and imperfections, habitual, natural, and spiritual. Contemplatives call it infused contemplation, or mystical theology, whereby God secretly teaches the soul and instructs it in the perfection of love, without efforts on his own part, beyond a loving attention to God, listening to his voice, and admitting the light he sends, but without understanding how this is infused contemplation. It says the works in the bracket are not in the MSS. And inasmuch as it is the loving wisdom of God, it produces special effects in the soul, for it prepares it by purifying and enlightening it for union with God and love. It is the same loving wisdom which by enlightening purifies the blessed spirits that here purifies and enlightens the soul. I will tell you there's also some footnotes. There's a footnote here from Aristotle, and so it's in Greek. And then again, the Psalms. I'll show you that little footnote. The footnotes are very tiny, friends, but very worthwhile looking at. Perhaps not when you read it the first time. You may be a little overwhelmed, but I think this is a book to come back to again and again. I'm looking for something else to show you. There's a symbol in here that not everyone knows. Of course, when I was preparing, I saw it everywhere, and I didn't mark it. And now I can't find... here. You'll see this in encyclical language too. See how it's almost two S's typed one over the other? That means section. That's all that means, is section number. So it's not an actual paragraph number, although sometimes it ends up being a paragraph. It means section number. So these could be considered section numbers as well, although most of them, again, are paragraphs. They could be called section numbers because sometimes it could be 2 or 3 paragraphs. These appear to just be one. I wonder if that's the same throughout. These do appear to be, each paragraph is numbered. I had not noticed that either. But sometimes, like especially in encyclicals, it can be 4 or 5 and 6 paragraphs, but only one number for that section. And then the next one is 1 paragraph, next section. It's hard to tell. This one does appear to be whole paragraphs, each paragraph having its own unique number for that chapter. Is there any resources in the back? Friends, I don't believe there is. We have chapter 25, and it ends with another stanza of the poem. Lovely. It's beautiful. I do encourage you to get out and get this. It is from Tan Classics edition. Tan has a Classics Made Simple, as well as this particular book, this edition, the Tan Classics main book, is available in ebook and MP3. And yes, if you order through the link in the description below, I can get a tiny cut of your purchase price. But know that on special times of the year, like around St. Benedict's feast day, if you go to the website, there are some massive sales. Now, I won't get any credit for that, but you will get the benefit of getting these great books. And the further we all raise in our spiritual lives, the higher we go, the better we all are. So I don't mind missing those few pennies here and there. But I thank you for helping my family, and as well, friends, may God bless you and keep you, may make his face to shine upon you and to be gracious unto you. May the good Lord bless you. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.